What's up, my miners of intelligence and consciousness? I'm Rick Brooks, and this is Rick's Mind. Today with me, I have PhD Todd Duncan, who is a PhD in physics at Pacific University. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rick. It's great to be here. Excited to chat.
I'm very excited to speak with you as well. John and I are trying to get better at bringing in really smart minds, and understand you listen to the Loeb podcast, and we're definitely going to get into aliens as always, because I love them, and I love the possibility that there is something out there that might be smarter than us. But I think before we dive into that area, I'd kind of like to, figure out how you got interested in physics and kind of get your story.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really happy to be part of this, partly just because I like the framework of what you're doing, of sort of, just asking questions and kind of exploring the universe. And I think it's going to be really fun to look back after you have a bunch of these collected and just have like all these. So my story is kind of along those lines, is that I grew up just kind of really curious about deep questions, like I wanted to know, does the universe go on forever, and what happens when we die, and all the things that probably a lot of people think about. But so I guess, and I watched Cosmos, the Carl Sagan
yep.
Cosmos, right?
Oh yeah.
And I just was totally hooked on that, and especially the interdisciplinary, the sort of like, I didn't just want to do science, I wanted to do the art and the poetry and the who are we, like what are humans and how do we fit into all this? So I was just totally, there's the scene where he kind of says, come with me on this journey to explore the universe. And I was right there, it's just like, all right, I'm with you wherever we're going. So, I was like 9, I think, and I didn't know what astrophysics was or any of that sort of thing. But so that sort of started me, though. Like, I wanted to learn about all that sort of stuff. And kind of the journey, I think, has been, I don't know, I almost see it like I'm a physicist, but I'm not attached to being just in physics. Like, I just sort of want to explore the questions, and kind of my path to get here has been a lot of wandering, of just kind of like, what do I need to do to be in the right place to try to get the answers to questions that I'm curious about? And I guess sort of the big thing career-wise was that it did seem really important to me that, like, all these other things are interesting, but somehow we've got to have something to ground us, right? And something to filter. Like, we can speculate about so much stuff. But I felt like there was something in physics that I needed that was, like, these are the core principles, and this is how the world, this is how the world works. Not completely, because I think there are some things that are sort of outside of the realm of what we can maybe address with physics, but that somehow we have to have a filter, right? So that we're not just speculating about whatever we want.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. This is taking philosophy, right, and showing it in the material world. That's the beauty of physics. It's people that live in their head, but then want to do experiments to justify maybe some of their thoughts. That's what, and that's, my interpretation of it. I mean, seems like you have a fairly simple one. And what questions did you try and answer in so far have you been trying to answer in your career?
That's a good question. So, I mean, I guess the driving thing for me, I sort of got caught up at some point as a kid on, this sort of, there's this tension between kind of how we tend to interpret the science picture of the world, sort of the narrative that science tells about the world, that I think is separate from the science itself, but it gets entangled, which is this kind of meaningless, kind of the reductionist, materialist kind of narrative that leads to the idea that, well, we're just meaningless kind of, things in this material world, right? And that really bothered me, like, at a really deep level as a kid. And so I sort of see that I have this phrase of looking for meaning in the modern universe that's kind of been my driving force, is sort of how can I reconcile, like, the subjective experience and the desire for purpose and values and all that sort of stuff with this picture I was getting about, the world that seems to be how it sort of works. So that's been if I look back and sort of see like what things I've been interested in along the way, including cosmology, which is, kind of what I focused on, it's been this kind of how can we access the science in a way that, like I said, keeps us grounded, but also doesn't forget that there's wonder and there's mystery and there's, all these other things going on there. So I've been interested in questions about consciousness, right? Like, how does consciousness fit within the universe? And then you have to get into quantum mechanics because it's just cool. There's so many interesting puzzles, but partly it really gets at this idea that the world is not as cut and dry as we sometimes kind of convince ourselves that it is. And so yeah, I guess I could talk a long time about those sorts of things, but that's been the driving question. Has been that where does meaning live in the world as we understand it through science?
Yes, and I do like that you brought up consciousness, because I just read a book not that long ago. I think it's called Blind Sight, and it kind of questions in a very sci-fi way consciousness. So it's like it's first contact, right? The little synopsis: you have people having first contact with an alien species. And we think that they're conscious, but they're not. I mean, the kind of a brief synopsis is they are smarter than we are, but they're not conscious. They're not acting in a conscious manner. And they think that consciousness it's a liability and not an asset, because they're able to make decisions and think faster, right? And so I've never thought about consciousness in that sense, that it is a liability, from this author's perspective, right? That it could be a liability and not an asset. Like he's like it's during the book you kind of figure out really it's a chess match, but it's not a chess match between the humans. It's a chess match between the computer that they call the captain, right? That's making all these calculations and then decides that it's hostile, and then I'm ruining the plot. Spoiler alert. And ends up, going to war with this thing, and it kind of as a zero-sum game, like they both kind of cancel each other out. But like we wouldn't have been able to think that fast and see. So is it like? Have you ever thought like maybe consciousness isn't the best thing, because we have our brains, we have 1.5 million year old software, and we're so concentrated on our egos and finding mates and just getting weighed down by all of these things. But then we have computers that can make art and write symphonies now, and through artificial intelligence. I mean, I obviously think I'm biased. I think consciousness is awesome, but is it
right.
really in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so you're thinking like, is there a way of being aware somehow without being conscious or something?
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. That's kind of essentially what this writer was kind of teasing. Like, how can what if we met something that is aware but isn't really conscious? It's a mind-blowing concept. It's a very weird book. I enjoyed it because I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and I'm going to check it out, because I mean, one of the things I was, as I was kind of thinking about things we might talk about and with aliens and all that, one of the things that fascinates me is the idea that maybe maybe some sort of alienness is all around us and we don't recognize it, right? Is this sort of idea that, I mean, we're very biased on our, maybe plants are conscious, think about sort of the Gaia hypothesis sort of thing, maybe there's something more holistic. Oh, sort of like the idea that the Earth is sort of an organism in some sense, right? That the Earth as a whole is.
I've not heard that. I'm very intrigued, because that makes a lot of sense. In that case, we would probably be a virus on the planet.
Yeah, that's true. Right. You might be a virus in that context.
Probably be a virus on that context. But I definitely, the natural world, the idea that I'm not 100%. When you bring up plants and consciousness, that is an idea I spent a lot of time thinking about, because you have mycelium in the forest floor that has the ability to transfer nutrients from one tree to another, right? It communicates. There's basically a neural network underneath our feet. And that's pretty heavy stuff, right? There is so many bacteria and stuff. I mean, if we took a shovel and dug a foot down, we'd probably find new forms of bacteria. Like that's just it's incredible. And then you have different like sea creatures. You have like whales have an entire especially killer whales, they have a bigger brain than we do with more. I'm getting in the weeds here, John. You might need to pull this up, but they have a completely different section of their brains that we don't have, and I do not know what that's called. I'm way over my skis here. I'm not a biologist, but it's something that I read and it escapes my memory. But I definitely think that there is some credence to the fact that the Gaia hypothesis, which I've never heard of. So thank you for that.
James Lovelock is the originator of that. I don't know very much in detail, but the general idea is a lot like what you're talking about, right? The idea that you can see the planet as kind of an organism that that has feedback mechanisms, right? That there's sort of, it responds to things, and maybe until you just mentioned it, I never thought about it in terms of life forms that may have a kind of a sentience that isn't conscious, right? That would be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, plants, if a giraffe's munching on one acacia tree, it'll send a chemical signal in the wind, right? And then it'll change the other acacia trees, their leaves will get more bitter, right? Like if that's not a form of communication and a little bit of awareness, I mean, it's pretty bizarre. John?
I found what you were talking about whales.
Yeah.
So besides the fact that whale brains are obviously much larger than human brains, they have where was this? Oh, I just had it. Here it is. They have more lobes, like you were saying. Their limbic system is not contained to one lobe of the brain like humans. It's an extra paralimbic lobe.
I think they have a larger emotional center, or more developed emotional center too. But again,
that's true. It also says this article that I'm reading. It's a combination of multiple structures that it's like a super enhanced limbic system, basically.
Cool. Don't even know what that is. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just thinking now that, maybe whales may have all the answers for us here, because they, from an astronomy point of view, right, at least some whales have much larger pupils, right, larger eyes. So I've often wondered about, if you have 10-inch diameter eyes and you look up in the sky, especially out in the ocean somewhere where it's, what does the sky look like to a whale, right?
Yeah, and there's no light pollution out there either.
And you basically have telescopes for eyes, or small telescopes for eyes. So, and then if they have this processing capability, that you might need to chat with them. You should probably bring one on the show.
I would love to. They just don't have they don't have thumbs though, and they can't manipulate their environment. So that's their knock. They could be smarter than us for all we know. We don't know. We can't talk to them.
Well, and which really does, getting us to the idea of aliens that we kind of started out, the theme of, it does make me wonder, right? Whether what we look for is going to bear any resemblance to what's actually out there, right? The things that we know how to use to look for aliens may not at all be the right. We look with radio signals, and we look with, even assuming that they're sending spacecraft of some kind or artifacts or whatever. Maybe they have just totally different ways of interacting, viewing the world.
Mm-hmm. Maybe they're
we don't know what to look for.
Maybe they're just going along the asteroid belts and dropping little fungi on these rocks with the hopes that they'll hit a planet and then genetically mutate and adapt and survive and seeding life. Who knows? I like to look at the universe as a giant ecosystem. to the likes of which we don't, and think of like, panspermia. I got into this with Dr. Loeb. That idea, I think, has some serious credence in the conversation. I think it sounds super logical to me. And the fact that we have bacteria on this planet that can survive at the bottom of the ocean next to an underground, a volcano, essentially. I'm using the completely wrong terminology, but those vents that
the undersea vents, the sulfur vents and things like that, right?
Exactly. That can survive there just fine. There's a type of bacteria that can survive the vacuum of space. It looks like a bear. I do not know the name of that, but
tardigrades. Yeah.
Thank you. So tardigrades. Thank you so much. Yeah, that blows my mind, and that's right here on this planet. I definitely think that finding some sort of organism on Mars is inevitable. I really do. I think that that's the start. I think that that's how we start, is finding some sort of microbe or something on Mars. Do you know if they found? I thought they'd found like frozen ice on Mars, but could be completely wrong. Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's frozen ice on the moon. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure because there's definitely signs of water. So yeah. So you're right. It seems likely that there at least was life on Mars, if not currently. But be interesting to see what our reaction. It's interesting. Like, I'm just thinking about the fact that I take for granted that there must be other life out there, and it still matters to me that we actually find it, right? I mean, it's sort of going back to the filter, right? The physics filter. It's like, my whole worldview is sort of based on the idea that, well, there must be, right? It just seems like the conditions, there's so many planets that would be habitable and so on. And yet, we're still looking for that really clear, conclusive evidence that,
But we haven't even searched a fraction of a percent of what. I didn't even know what decimal point it would be. I think of like 100 zeros in front of a 0.1, and that's still probably too small, of all the planets, asteroids, all the things we would need to search to find it. We're at we're at like essentially preconception here right now, like it was as far as like even beginning the search for life. And it's just so ridiculous that people think, I don't know if I've met anyone that actually thinks, we're completely alone. I really just don't think that people believe that. I can't imagine you would believe that, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I have encountered people who do. I mean, it makes me think of, one of my favorite quotes is Arthur C. Clarke, who says something like, either we're alone in the universe or we're not. And either way, the implications are terrifying, or something like that. I forget exactly how he words it, but I mean, either way, it's, I don't know. I like thinking about it in the terms of either way. Let's see, how do I want to say this? The process of thinking about whether we're alone or not is valuable. It feels like, right? Because if you actually sit yourself down and sort of get yourself in a frame of mind of, okay, what if we're actually alone? Like, in all this vastness, there's nobody else around, and ponder the implications of that. That blows my mind to accept that.
Yeah.
And then to accept that there are other aliens out there that, like you said, might be way smarter than us that we could learn from. That's mind blowing. And so if you can sort of keep those together and know that, okay, one of the two of those is true. And so, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like there's something about that. I mean, we can talk about that more later, but I'm really a big fan of that engagement, right? That there's something that happens in the process of thinking about these questions and doing science, and that changes us regardless of what the answer is, sort of. And I don't know, I just feel like that's super important.
We should talk about that now, because I've never really, to be honest, I've never thought I don't think ever, that we're completely alone. I've never actually seriously considered that, which is odd, because I consider some pretty wild ideas. I entertain some wild ideas, but I've never actually fully considered that. So I think it'd be a fun exercise. Let's do it. Okay. What if we are alone, completely alone in the universe? what are those implications? Like, I mean, I'm having a tough time even contemplating.
Well, there's a
that.
huge responsibility, kind of, right? I mean, there's this kind of sense of, if we screw up, we were the chance to do it. So that's one thing that comes to mind for me. The other is just and it depends on sort of how you picture, this goes back to the like looking for meaning in the universe kind of thing. Like, would it be the case that we're the only ones because in some sense, like the Gaia hypothesis or like the sort of cosmic version of that, where you sort of think of, because a whole other tangent here kind of, but there's a big question about why is the universe why are the conditions in the universe, like the laws of physics, the speed of light, the strength of gravity, all these things, why are they such that they allow the conditions where life can arise at all? And then there's a question about, if you were just dreaming up universes, you could imagine a universe where none of that's even possible.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that we're the only ones, then you could almost imagine it sort of like I don't know, we might be the only ones, but in some sense we're that expression of the whole universe, right? That sort of came, we're the only ones that became conscious, but there's, we're sort of the tip of the iceberg, or I don't know, that's not quite the right word.
Do you think the tip of the spear, where the first iteration of all the laws combined produced us, and that maybe in the next few billion years, it'll produce something else? If we were completely alone, we could prove that would be where you and maybe some other of your other colleagues would consider, like, that's where it. And so what do you do with that information? Like, is it our obligation to then go out and begin seeding these other planets with life? Would that be humanity's task? If we could prove that, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because then it would be really important that we preserve it, right? So that we need to seed other places to make sure that if something happens to Earth in an asteroid collision or something, that's a really good point. But yeah, I like that idea that it just brought to mind. There's a phrase from a writer named Brian Swim that refers to us as the eyes of the Milky Way. I was trying to think of the tip of the spear, extension that's a little less warlike or something.
Warlike.
Yeah.
I read a lot.
That idea that the whole Milky Way is necessary. I guess that's what I was sort of getting at, right? Is the idea that for us to be here, the whole Milky Way, the whole rest of the universe is necessary. So in some sense, even if we're just the eyes, but the whole universe is sort of conscious in a sense. So I'm not sure quite where I'm going with that, but
hey, it's okay. It's okay. What you said, we just glossed over what you just said. Like if we could definitively prove that we're the only conscious living things, right?
Right.
That the whole point, like the whole universe, like conspired to create us, this one thing. That's a pretty dope way of looking at it. It is a very heavy responsibility. It's a fun idea to entertain, because then I feel like if you could prove, I don't know if this would do anything in the sort of the messed up world we live in today, right? But if we could unequivocally prove that to everyone, I really do feel like we would have some sort of obligation or duty. I think we do anyways, right? I think that a lot of the smart people that I've talked to, especially in the physics community, they're very focused on, and a lot of engineers as well, right, that are working on these rockets and whatnot. They're really focused on getting us off this rock. I think that that's a wonderful thing. I think that it makes me sad when we don't fund missions to the moon anymore. Like, I think Congress just shut one down. It's inspiring, and we need inspiration in this world. We need something that we can all be a part of, and we can all witness that we are. It's in our DNA to explore. We've completely, maybe conquered the wrong word, but I can't think of anyone else so many. We've conquered the planet. We have spread across the entire planet, a lot of it just with a hope and a prayer, or just to find more food and to graze. And we've done that. We've been here. We've done that. There's no more peaks left to be climbed. There's no more pastures left to be found, or, no more promised land. That's it. This is it. The only way, we've got the ocean still. So I miss that. My bad. We still have the ocean, but we also have to look above. And those are the two last frontiers for our species, right? And one is on this planet, and we should definitely explore that more because the ocean's very interesting. But I like space because we can't live in the water. And, I don't know if we can live in space yet, but we got to figure out how to do it.
This is not so friendly either.
No, I know. As soon as I said that.
You're right.
But yeah, I mean, this is the first time in human history that not all members of our species are living on the planet. We've got people in space right now.
Yep.
And, the next step, we got to put a base on the moon. Have to. I think they're going to start mining the moon. I know Russia and China and the United States are decided to mine the moon. I guess there's a bunch of minerals and stuff out there. By the way, question, did you know that Neil Armstrong saw, I believe, a green light on his mission?
No.
Have you heard about, oh, buddy, yes, I know something you don't know. There are a lot, and I cannot remember the name, so just, John, Google lights on the moon, but there are a lot. Okay, you got something? Sweet.
I already found it. Yeah, it wasn't. It was Neil Armstrong, and I believe it was though Buzz Aldrin that saw it, not Neil Armstrong.
Okay,
but they both saw, or he's at least Buzz Aldrin saw green lights in the distance, like green flashes. I think it was.
Green flashes in the distance. Will you find out what this phenomenon is called? There are different astronomers that have seen flashes of light. Some green, some orange, and nobody knows. Everyone knows who went to the moon, but nobody.
Specifically on the moon.
Specifically on the moon, there are flashes of light on the moon that people have observed, and it's something that you can find on the NASA website. It is a phenomena that keeps happening, and no one really can explain what's going on. And I just find that interesting that no one seems to know about these flashes on the moon. I mean, this is documented. Yeah. I don't know if we've captured any pictures or images of any of them, but I know someone thought they saw a volcano eruption on the moon. I mean, I don't know which. I believe it was a Russian astronomer, and that is as good as my brain is. This is why I paid DeMarco the big bucks here. He's gonna back me up.
He's gonna look up everything for you. He's your secondary brain. Yeah, we're demonstrating the sort of ecosystem based consciousness. Right?
So I found the best explanation of your flashing green lights you're talking about is they believe they're not sure what the origin is, but that it is likely lensing from the light being bent around the moon.
Okay. Because I was thinking, there's a green flash when the sun sets, that there are these green flashes that people have documented, right, of at the sunset time. So, and that has to do with the atmosphere of the Earth. So I wonder if there's some similar kind of light, bending property that happens with dust on the moon or something. I don't know, that's super interesting though.
It is.
See, that's the fun stuff. It's things we don't understand yet so that we can explore, and there's mystery, right?
Yes, and there's a lot of them. And this is what I try and get anyone to understand, especially talking to, I haven't talked to as many PhDs in physics or any of the hard sciences as I'd like to. But generally speaking, they're just as curious as all of us are. The only difference between you and them is that they actually went and fucking started looking for answers in books, and I'm just sitting back here like, well, what's that mean? What's going on here? That's really I think that sometimes I feel like science has been a little bit hijacked and manipulated. I feel like it's difficult because it's ran by humans, and that's the problem, right? But it's difficult, and you have egos that are involved, but it's sometimes difficult to have a different idea, or to step outside the mainstream and the safety net of modern science and really come up with a unique perspective, or something that might even be silly. Like a lot of the major discoveries we have been on accident. Like it's been someone made a mistake, or I was like, oh, well, that's weird. I didn't know I could create this chemical if I did that. Thought this was and I just feel it's important to have people like you and Dr. Loeb, right, that are questioning and curious and having an open mind, right? And I've said this on this podcast multiple times. The mind is like a parachute. It only works if it's open. Yep. And being able to entertain these ideas. And so I kind of want to get into like what Dr. Loeb saw. Like, what are your thoughts of Oumuamua and this object not having a cometary tail? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, with the caveat, of course, that I'm not an expert on these kinds of objects, but I can be sort of an educated, mostly neutral observer, right? Kind of reflecting on none of us are completely neutral, but yeah. So, I mean, so a couple things. So one is, I mean, kind of going back to something you were saying before about how little we know and how little we've explored. It sort of blows my mind that, like, for example, there are something like 20 or 30,000 known near-Earth asteroids, just within our own solar system. And only a few of them have been observed carefully enough to know their shapes, right? From the kind of the same way they do with Oumuamua, where they can watch the light as it turns and try to figure out the shape and stuff. So, I mean, that's sort of my starting point, is like, it blows my mind how much stuff is coming through our solar system that we have no idea about, right? I mean, just the limits of our awareness of what's going on, right? That, that other objects like Oumuamua have probably been through that we just haven't happened to spot, and so on. And hopefully, I mean, there are a lot of surveys, including the one that Avi, I think, is involved with, but there are others too, right? That I think we'll find more of these over the next few years. So hopefully these will be answered. So I mean, I guess I've read, just a few of the papers and kind of looked at some of the data on it and stuff. And my general sense is that this particular object is probably not an alien spaceship, right? I mean, it just sort of seems like
you son of a gun. No, I just kidding.
I mean, that's my, I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah. But that's my sense from seeing, and also kind of looking historically, like there have been, this is the first time we've seen an object outside of, coming from outside of our solar system passing through. I think there's one other one now that's been recorded. So, the chances of the very first one being an alien spaceship are probably pretty small, but that's you got you have a good point. It's the first one we did observe. That's a good point. Right. Continue. Sorry. I'm going to sort of withhold judgment. I think most people probably will, until we have some statistics, right? Until we have some other objects like this or whatever. I think, like the stuff that Avi pointed out, I mean, there are certainly some peculiarities about this that are and were worth investigating, right? I mean, so the fact that it didn't have a cometary tail, the extreme flatness of it, that sort of thing. From what I can tell, the explanation that I've seen that seems to make the most sense is that there's fairly recently, certainly this year, there was a paper about that it was nitrogen ice, made of nitrogen ice that's sort of like what's on Pluto. And again, not being an expert on this, but just sort of trusting what people said in the paper, it seems like that fits the observations pretty well, and and also is really cool because it gives us this kind of glimpse at, like, we didn't know that there were Plutos around other stars, and now we probably do if this idea turns out to be correct or whatever. So there's this sort of balance of, like, keeping an open mind and being super excited about the possibility that this could be an alien spaceship,
Mm-hmm.
and then also trusting this process, right? I mean, that's sort of the thing that keeps
Yes.
coming back
Yeah.
to me is like the process is working the way it should, right? Which is the people argue and they propose different explanations, and then more data come in, and we sort of. So yeah, so I guess I would say what I've seen so far leads me to believe that the nitrogen ice idea is probably what explains this one. But
I got a full disclosure. I'm pushing back right now. I'm pushing back.
Go ahead.
Son.
Yeah.
But I also need to lead with this. I'm kind of screwed here, totally biased, totally think it's an alien. I want to believe, so that's also something that we need to consider in my little retort here.
Sure. I want it to be too. So just
okay,
I totally want it to be.
Good.
Which is why I'm trying to be really careful.
Yeah. No, I know. We've never seen that before, though, to my knowledge, right? We've never seen a piece of nitrogen ice go by that originated outside of our solar system and then went out. We've never seen that before either.
That's right.
So we have two complete phenomena that we've never seen. He's saying that he's using Occam's razor, like this is the most likely solution to his logic. And I do not, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't it speed? I think the reason it sped up as it left, like went past Earth, doesn't have to do with like it going around Earth and kind of being slingshotted away. Is that kind of why it's sped it?
Yeah.
That's my understanding too, but I do not have the physics or the math to be 100% sure. In fact, I've got very low skills in both of those, so I want to throw that out there. What's up, John?
So you're accelerating Oumuamua when it transited the sun and it was passing Jupiter. It was approximately 100,000 kilometers farther than it could have been based purely on gravitational acceleration.
Right. So it had to have some other push, right?
Dog, it sounds like engines to me. I don't know, though.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm trusting the papers that report that, sublimating nitrogen, they say could do that.
That's what I was going to say. Are they saying that it was the melting of the nitrogen potentially that would have propelled it faster? That's exactly what it's saying, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So my understanding, and it's really the same phenomena, right? I mean, a rocket is a artificial version of doing that sort of thing, right? You're conserving momentum and spitting some momentum out one direction so that you can go the other direction. So either one, it's sort of the same explanation. It's just a question of whether it was done by consciousness or whether it was done by
nature.
By nature, which, back to our early conversation, maybe those are not completely distinct, right? Maybe it's our global consciousness or whatever.
Yeah, but we really dug ourselves into a hole by going off on that tangent, didn't we?
Yeah.
Either way, that's pretty fucking cool. Like if it's the nitrogen, which has never been seen before, it's probably not what it is. Probably an alien. That's still amazing. And if it's an alien, I mean, then we know, right? Like, but we're never gonna be able to answer that until we see another one.
Exactly.
I mean, we're really not going to be we're really never going to be able to answer it until we're able to like maybe intercept something like that.
And there's a possibility, and again, you may know more about this than I do, I've seen reports of it would be possible to send some sort of spacecraft. I mean, right, it's going so fast that it's not, something new would have to be developed to be able to do it. But I've at least seen reports about people talking about being able to send some sort of probe that, it'd still be decades out in the future to actually do a flyby. But
yeah, well, the United States Navy, I believe, issued a patent for a warp drive. Now, also, John, Google that because I think that's we're getting.
Oh, that's probably there is a small group at NASA that I think is like the Alcubierre drive is what is the technical name for the warp drive. It's named after the physicist that kind of proposed the technique. So so theoretically that is possible to have a warp drive. I think we're a long way from actually building one, but then who knows?
Do tell how this is a possibility because I am very interested.
Yeah. Okay. So So the basic idea of it is it's very similar to so like Einstein's framework for thinking about space and time, right? General relativity essentially thinks of space-time as a kind of a fabric, is sort of a loose analogy to the idea, right? And so that basically, rather than gravity being a force like the electrical force, that the reason that we experience gravity is because matter and energy that are around warp the space-time, so they bend it, and then the other things that come by then move in response to that, kind of like the standard analogy is put a bowling ball on a trampoline and then roll a golf ball by, right? And it moves around according to that. So, and the equations of general relativity are kind of the formal expression of this kind of idea that on the one side, matter and energy tell space-time how to bend, and then space-time tells matter how to move, right? Tells things how to move.
Yeah.
So once you have that framework with the equations, then you can start doing the really fun stuff of trying to think about, well, what else does this predict, right? What else can happen? And one of the things that leads to is the idea of expanding space, which is what we think is behind, the whole Big Bang model of the universe, right? That space is expanding and the galaxies are moving away from each other and so on. So a kind of a similar effect related to that is if you can collect the right kind of matter and energy together, which is kind of a strange form of an unusual form of energy that you need to be able to do this. But you could potentially, on a small scale, make kind of a warping of space-time that would be sort of like, the analogy I've seen for this is it'd be a little bit like you're sitting on a picnic blanket and, lazy day, you're just kind of hanging out on the blanket and you want some grapes or whatever that are across the picnic blanket. Rather than physically moving across the blanket to go get it, you can scrunch the blanket up and kind of pull it over to you, right? So that's essentially the warp drive, is that kind of process. And so my understanding is that it's been shown that that's at least theoretically possible to create that kind of situation, so that you could get somewhere without having to move through the space.
Exactly. Space is moving past you. And you're kind of you're staying stationary. It's like a giant, you're just unzipping the space-time continuum and stepping into the Andromeda galaxy and going to explore Kepler 22b.
Right.
Which is the dream.
It's kind of like I don't know if you've ever read A Wrinkle in Time, I have not seen the movie. Madeline Engel's kind of idea of the wrinkle in time or wrinkle in space is kind of the same idea, sort of.
DeMarco, what's up?
So I found your patents that you were talking about, the Navy's patents. I think the one that you're talking about is a high frequency gravitational wave propulsion device.
Ooh, okay, that's
that
different.
Would use where is it? It would use using the Paris effect. Controlled motion of electrically charged matter via acceleration, vibration, and/or acceleration spin subjected to smooth yet rapid acceleration transients in order to generate extremely high energy, high intensity electromagnetic fields. And the Navy says that they are planning to or trying to use it to develop a propulsion system with a fusion drive for a hybrid aerospace underwater craft.
Wow.
I don't know what any of that means. Can you translate that for me, Todd?
I'm not sure I know what most of that means either. Other than I can tell that it's not my warp drive that I was just talking about. But so somehow it's more like just in fancy terms, it's more like a traditional, some sort of propulsion system where they're generating a high enough energy to be able to spit some kind of plasma or whatever out the back to propel you the other direction or whatever. But that sounds really cool too.
Yeah, well, I mean, the military, that's where you got to look sometimes for really, really sick technological advancements. They had a computer before everyone else in like the 50s. Yeah. And then we have nuclear submarines and nuclear aircraft carriers that can stay out indefinitely. Like, we've figured out nuclear propulsion. And it's not available on a large scale in a commercial. I mean, I don't know if that's a good idea, but it's still like we got it, we figured it out, and so sometimes I keep an eye on these patents, and sometimes I poke around and see what's going on, because they're right at the cutting edge. I mean, they've got shit that I can't even imagine what they have, but that was submitted quietly, and some crazy alien person that I know told me about it. Was like, dude, this is it. They have the technology. But I'm interested to kind of see what happens there.
Yeah, that's not something I knew about either. So, and again, I mean, I guess you wouldn't be able to go faster than the speed of light.
No,
with that, but you could still go really fast.
Would you be going faster than this? Would you be going faster than the speed of light with a warp drive, essentially?
Well, I mean, that's a little bit of a tricky question. I mean, so not really. You wouldn't be moving through space faster than the speed of light, but at least in principle, you could get from one place to another faster than light could cover that distance. Exactly,
because another example that I saw with this is like you fold a piece of paper hot dog style and stick your finger, stick the pencil through it, and it's like, oh, you're there. Right. And that's a good way for me to understand this. You're just cutting the distance off, so you could be there, and I don't even know. There's a lot of
in principle, you could be there in any amount of time, right?
Exactly. There's an interesting. Okay, I got to bring this up since I've got a much brighter mind than me. I was watching some video. Is there a point in space, and I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize. Is there a point in space at which you can travel to that you could never get back to? No, not never get back to Earth, but it would take X amount of what's up, John? You figured out what I'm trying to say?
I think that's the what is that, the like cosmic horizon.
Cosmic horizon. That's actually
that's a point where you go past that point. It's impossible to go back to your original position because you could not match the rate of acceleration of the universe and accelerate faster than it to get back, because while you are traveling away at whatever your relative speed is, the universe is also moving and expanding.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
So, this is definitely in the great minds think alike category, because the three of us were all thinking about the same thing here.
Yeah.
So, because Rick, as you were talking about the wrinkling thing and how fast, that's a case where we see it happen for sure. Is that people talk about some galaxies moving away from us, quote, faster than the speed of light, which isn't really quite accurate. It's like what John's saying, that if you think of space as this fabric that's expanding, right? It's let's just say every little square of space is doubling in a certain amount of time. Then you can think about, if you're far enough away, there's enough space already in between the 2 points that you're talking about, that doubling means taking them, over the next second or whatever it is, additionally another amount away from each other that is bigger. Let me say this better. The increase in distance between the two things you're talking about, like you and some home that you want to get back to, can get to the point where it's increasing faster than the fastest you can cover the distance. So it's sort of like being on a treadmill, right?
Yes.
It's sort of moving faster than you can run. And so you're never going to get back to the edge of whatever the long treadmill is, or something like that. And that's what we think, with a lot of evidence, right? I mean, that's what we think is really happening in the universe, that there is this cosmic horizon where we can't know what's beyond there, because there's no way for information from that to get to us.
Yeah, exactly. I've always thought about that, and I always wondered, like, does the warp drive, does that essentially negate that? Because that's something that you would need to really figure out, right? Like, I would assume that if we're able to develop a warp drive, because if we develop a warp drive, and we're out here exploring the cosmos and colonizing planets. Like, I would assume we need to kind of figure that out. I think it pretty much cancels it out because you're cutting a hole in space and being able to jump back. But still, I would hate to be on one of those missions where it's like, oh, we didn't factor this into this equation. We're lost in space,
Yeah, and it's using sort of the same principle. So I guess, I mean, it is sort of factored into that in some way. But yeah, so there's still limits to what you could do. But it would, I'd be pretty happy with being able to explore the entire observable universe. Even if I can't go beyond the horizon, there's still plenty to see in that.
Yeah, I think that this video, I don't even know the name of it, but it was like talking about, if you went this far out and then came back, this is what the Earth would look like if you went this far out. And then, I mean, that got to a point where like humans had become extinct and Earth had just was just absolutely, it's like, this would be a place without us. It was kind of depressing. Without us, like, this planet would be a place where there was so much life, like you wouldn't even recognize it. Like at a certain point of time, like the through continental shifting and stuff, like maybe there was a super like Pangea. I don't know. This is years ago or months ago. I don't remember. John, what's up?
So I think I might have found the warp drive that you were talking about, Dr. Duncan. I think it's the Alcubierre.
Yep, Alcubierre. I think it's Alcubierre. Yeah.
Yeah, Alcubierre. Yeah, it was. Let's see. It was a paper that was released by Bobic in Martire, I think, in 1994. The concept that they used was, instead of generating a massive gravity force to propel you, the idea is to take a planet-sized gravitational field and compress it somehow to the relative size of a spacecraft, and then you would have the gravitational ability or gravitational strength of a planet instead of having to generate one.
That you could bend space-time enough to
exactly.
We don't have enough energy to power that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's some engineering issues. I mean, it's cool to just know that things like this are plausible. I mean, I think that's what they've demonstrated so far, is that it doesn't violate any of the known laws of physics. So it's kind of buried in the things that we know from other observations and stuff, which is fascinating.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. My apologies. Sure. What is one thing, like we have quantum mechanics, that's where things get weird, but what is one thing in physics that, and I should have looked this up, that we just don't have an answer to yet, or some, I think we have all the laws hammered out, but what's one thing that is stumping people right now that I should be aware of?
That's a good question. Let's see. Well, I mean, I think the dark matter issue is certainly one. I mean, there are a lot. We could spend a lot of time talking about all the things that stump us. That's the fun, right? But I mean, it just, and more generally, like what's causing, Vera Rubin and other people kind of realized that galaxies are not gravitationally, like the stars we can see are not orbiting in a way that matches the gravitational influence of the matter that we can see, which is no big surprise because, of course, there's stuff that's dark, right? I mean, it doesn't give off visible light. But the scale of it is such that there's essentially if the observations are correct, which they seem to be, that it means that either we need way, way more matter than the kind of normal matter that we're made out of, many times more, in order to explain the orbits, right? Just to have enough gravitational effect to cause the pull to make them spin the way they, to make them orbit the way they are. Or there's something about our understanding of gravity that breaks down at those large scales, so that we're miscalculating how much mass there needs to be because we have the laws of gravity wrong in some way. And most of kind of mainstream, kind of in the same spirit of the mainstream versus the maverick kind of views of things, right? Most of the mainstream astronomers, I think, are still pretty confident that it's some kind of dark matter, but it's still a mystery what that would be, and people have looked for it in a lot of ways and haven't found it. So there's a lot of speculation about. I have a feeling something big is going to happen there, right? Either we're going to find some interesting new particle that we didn't know about, or we're going to have to reshape, not reshape, but at least modify kind of how we view how gravity works on these large scales. And either way, it's going to be a big change, I think, to, a big breakthrough in how we see things.
So I really thought that we had figured out that there was dark matter. So we can't definitively prove. I thought for some reason that accelerator, that massive accelerator that we built, that we had found some or something, but I'm off there.
I don't think so. I mean, there's been a lot of hints, but is it the
Hadron accelerator?
Yeah, so that was finding the Higgs boson. So they have found evidence of the Higgs boson, which is related to mass, what gives things mass. But that's not the dark matter particles they're looking for are something like a neutrino that doesn't interact like with light or basically with anything except gravity and the so-called weak nuclear force, but that has more mass that could explain these effects. So again, it's like people assume it's there, and it's by its nature, it's very elusive, right? I mean, it's a particle that if it exists, there are many of them streaming through us right now, which is also true of neutrinos.
Yeah,
right? That they're pouring through you all the time, but they don't interact, so we don't detect them. So as you can imagine, building a detector to see one of these is complicated, right? They put huge tanks of water down in deep mine shafts where they don't have other particles getting in the way and stuff. So the experiments are hard to find them, but still there are constraints that have been put on this that seem. Most of the predictions for what the properties of these particles should be have been ruled out by the experiments, and so a lot of people are trying to figure out what's going on with that. And that's again, like we talked about, that's the fun stuff, right? I mean, that's want things where we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and then for the listeners that might not understand, what is the importance of the Higgs boson?
Boson, yeah, the Higgs boson.
Yeah, what's the importance? What's the significance of that to the community?
It's essentially in the particle physics model of kind of all the different particles, just like the ones that most people are more familiar with, right? We're made out of protons and neutrons and electrons, right? So if you break down the matter that we're made out of, they're these particles. There are other kinds of particles. Well, the photon is a good example that light's made out of. The photon is one kind of boson. They're the particles that carry forces, I guess, it tends to be. So the significance of the Higgs boson is supposed to be that in this framework, it's what gives particles mass. So the interaction with the Higgs boson and how strong, some particles have more mass than others, that would mean that they interact more strongly with the Higgs boson.
Yep.
So the analogy I've seen is it's sort of like going through molasses, right? How much of a cross section you have for getting through something decides how much it slows you down or not. If you're very streamlined, you can go through easily. If you're not very streamlined, then you slow down, and that's what decides how much mass you have.
Absolutely.
That's why it's a big deal.
That part of physics has always been super difficult for me. The getting down to that granular level. I'm like, oh, what? Yeah. Let's talk about planets more. But that's
you notice that I'm a big picture.
Me too. But I would regret this. I got it. We're going to bring it back to aliens, and then I want to be respectful of your time as well. But we gotta bring up Mr. Lazar. Do you familiar with Bob Lazar?
Yeah, but I can't remember why. The name sounds familiar.
It's the guy that worked at Area 51. Came out. What? I believe that we just discovered this element that he talked about in the 80s, which is, I think, element 115. Do you know anything about this?
I don't.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. I'm not even going to try and explain it. It was something that these craft were, I believe, is what the fuel they ran on. John pulled this up though. I'm way over my
element
skis
115
here.
is called moscovium. It's a synthetic chemical element, and it was synthesized in 2003 by a team of Russian and American scientists at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Russia.
Okay. So 115 meaning that its atomic number is 115, I presume.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's 115, group 15, period 7.
Okay.
Hey, explain when Bob Lazar found out about this. So we'll pull that up. It was in the 80s.
So this is like Bob Lazar talked about it before it was created in the experiments in the Soviet experiments or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. There's enough of the paper trail that I've been on for me and many others. I'm not the only crazy person. You're talking to a crazy person, man. Full disclosure, 100%. I question everything.
That's the way we should be.
That is the way. There's just here's the one thing. I'll tell you something that's pretty trippy. This is a good place to kind of end. Are you familiar with the Dogon tribe in sub-Saharan? Oh, you are? Yes. Okay, good. I just bought a book on these. And for folks that don't know, Google it. Essentially, and I'll butcher this, so bear with me. But essentially, it's a tribe of people that these French anthropologists, they didn't discover them, but they started talking to them, and they happen to have a amazing amount of knowledge in astronomy and mathematics for like a tribal community. Like, this doesn't make any sense. They started talking to the elders. How did you get this knowledge? And they're like, we were visited by aliens like 5,000 years ago. So, and they discovered a planet. Don't know the planet, John. Be on the keyboard. They discovered a planet. They told them about this planet, and it was discovered by NASA in the 70s. And I found that fascinating. And this gets back to my conversation with Dr. Loeb. He's like, and we'll get 1 second. How do we know that we haven't been contacted, right, in the past? How do we not know that if something visited us here and it visited a tribe in sub-Saharan Africa or the Amazon or even in Europe, right, and they just kind of talked and explained some things and then they left, and that gets passed down through myths or stories, right? This is the way they keep records. And then this tribe still to this day has a religion that's based on this with the math and the astrology. That's something that we need to consider. It gets to the point of woo-woo, right? And you need a little woo-woo in life, friends. Remember that. You need a little woo-woo. Life's more fun with it. But it's a question. And I mean, it's when I found out about it, it's like, I need to buy a book on this. And there's probably going to be a lot of bullshit in this book that I'll have to sift through, but there's going to be some interesting stuff. John, what did you have to say? We can't hear you, man.
There it is. I got to unmute my mic. Sorry. Okay. Two things. First thing, the Bob Lazar, he described element 115 in the 1980s as it was a possible source of anti-gravitational propulsion, and what he described in detail was aircraft rotating and flying belly up and all kinds of different ways defying the laws of physics, just like the video of the Tic Tac pill things in the who is that? David Fravor.
Commander David Fravor.
Yeah. So there's that. And then the other thing, the Dogon, so they believe that they come from a planet in the Sirius B system.
Right.
And according to, I just had it. Where did it go? There. They say that Sirius B was discovered as early as 1844, but the Dogon have a 400-year-old artifact that depicts the Sirius A and B configurations, and they celebrate the cycle of Sirius A and B. It's weird. There's something about how they think that the Earth is an arc of sorts.
It's because they have myths, and they have a myth. Okay, all right, we're Todd, we're going to Looneyville, so strap in, my friend. They have a myth that there was a time before the moon. So they believe that the moon was either built or transported here, right? And placed in front of the sun. And it is weird because the moon's a strange place. We're getting woo-woo here, people, so bear with me. I believe that Neil Armstrong landed. He heard ringing or something like that. Also, pull that up. Could be full of shit, but I think I'm right. And if you look at the moon and how important it is to life on this planet, number one, it shields us from asteroids. It absorbs a lot of impact for us. Number two, it helps with the tide. The tide's helps the tide fluctuates in and out. And Todd, believe me, I'm at the end of my intelligence here, but I'm going to keep going. Great. All right. Yeah. And I believe, here it is. I think it protects us a bit from the sun. Could be full of shit there, but that's all I got. Those are my three things. I'm not
sure about that. Could be. But yeah, but anyway, but it's very, I mean, it's, in the spirit of all the things that have to come together to make a habitable planet, having a moon is one of those.
I do know that the moon as well. It doesn't help protect us from the sun, as far as I know, but it does. It's a huge gravitational pull that can attract a lot of asteroids and potential impact objects.
Covered that, John. Dog, I covered that, bro. Quit trying to steal my sunshine. No, but so that's their myth, right? And there's obviously going to be a lot of things that are like. It's a bit of a religion. It's a bit weird, but I feel like there's a little bit of truth in there, right? And again, I'm totally biased. And personally, I've said this a billion times. Life is far more fun with a lot of mystery and not being sure of everything. I would hate to be sure of everything. I'm always willing to learn new things. I will resist them if you say there's not aliens, hands down. But I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to entertain. Shame on you, Todd, earlier for not.
Now, wait a second. I want to clarify that I didn't say there were not aliens. I'm with you on there being aliens. I'm just not sure that particular. I'm not sure that Oumuamua is alien.
I know, right? That's fair. I'm obviously in the opposite camp, but again, you can't take it with a grain of salt, man. I'm so biased on this subject; it's not even funny. But
and I think, can I emphasize something that you said that I think is really important? Is that I think that's the beauty of this whole process is that you can have mystery and speculation and all these things, and then. And because you have this overarching framework that says we'll discuss it and we're open-minded about it and we'll collect observations and we'll see, right? So that you don't have to shut somebody down by just saying, well, you're not allowed to speculate because we have this framework where things will shake out. Right?
Oh yeah.
So I think that's what makes it fun.
100%. And the more, that's why I love talking with people like you and other academics, right? They're very happy that I'm so open-minded and interested. And because a lot of science, in my opinion, it's just years of toiling and darkness and discovering maybe one thing, and that's it. You're just contributing. And maybe we just had this conversation a few weeks ago on the pod with artists, right? Actually, I think it was last week. How many of these people dedicated their life and maybe made something so profound, but they were ahead of their time, and no one really could understand what it was that they discovered. They found the key that unlocks this mystery, and then they die, and they just drift off into obscurity, and that's their life's work. I mean, it's part of the human condition of just being silently disciplined and toiling away on a problem for years for the betterment of all of us. And it's something that, I don't know, it's something romantic. There's something beautiful about that. There's something also very tragic. I don't know. It's complex.
Those are related. The tragedy and the beauty are probably related, right?
Yeah.
I would add that, I think I've sort of said this before, but and this is my bias, is that I feel like there's something so profound that happens, like just this conversation that we just had, or like what I experience when I'm out with students with a telescope or the public with a telescope or whatever, like the process of engaging in these questions. Like I think it's important that we think seriously about, was Oumuamua an alien spacecraft, right? Whether or not we decide that it was, the process of thinking about that and evaluating it and engaging with those questions, like it's really transformative, right? I mean, at least for me, I'm in a totally different frame of mind when I'm like, oh, that's possible.
Yeah. I think that's, it kind of gives you a reason to maybe even get up, right? Like that.
Exactly.
You don't know everything, and that there are so many things out there waiting to be discovered. There are so many worlds that we don't know about and mysteries for us to solve. And I think that the fact that we'll never solve all of them and we'll never know everything, I think that that's a beautiful thing. And it's also very, it's a bit depressing if I'm being honest, but it's also like pretty cool. It gives meaning, right? It gives meaning to many people, and also is a great. I think back to when I was a kid, and I would think about the concept of. I have a very religious background, and so not that I am anymore, but that's how I was raised, and we would talk about the idea of God and how he's been there forever, much like the Big Bang, right? Both ideas kind of sound ridiculous to me, but I would think about one of the questions, well, so wait, what was before God? My dad would be like, nothing. It was just, he's been here forever. And I would remember when I was a little boy in my bedroom, and I would think about the idea of like infinity, because that was, that first number that little kids figure out. And I would honestly hallucinate thinking about this number because I could not understand it. It almost short-circuited my brain because I just did not have the tools to quite understand it. And if we're all being honest, everyone pretty much on the planet still doesn't even understand the number 1 billion. Like, we really can't wrap our minds around that. And then when we start talking about how large the universe is, that's even bigger. And we can't begin to understand how big and vast this thing is and how much mysteries and how many answers lie out there. I mean, our destiny is in the stars. That's where we all come from. We're all just a bunch of space junk, dust, right? And it's time we go out there.
Pondering the mystery.
Yeah. Hey man, this is a good place to end it.
Sounds good.
Todd, I really appreciate you. We're going to have you on again, man, for sure.
Absolutely.
This was a lot of fun. I'll come back more prepared once I read that book about the Dogon people, and any other weird, findings in the physics world. Please let me know, man. I'll have you on again. We'll talk about it.
We can have specific things if we come up. I super enjoy the conversation. Like I said, I just like being engaged with all that stuff with people like you guys who are thinking about it. So
yeah. Well, again, thanks. Do you have a book? Anything you want to plug? Now's your time.
Well, I can plug Pacific University, I guess. That's a good place. I do have a little book, I guess. There's a book that for a nonprofit that I ran for a while. It's called Glimpses of Wonder. You can find it on Amazon. It's sort of exploring these kinds of things. So yeah, I can plug that if you want something to look at.
Glimpses of Wonder. You heard it here, folks. First, folks. Hey, Todd, again, I appreciate it. Listeners, please smash the like button. It helps us a lot. Go ahead. Feel free to comment on all the videos. I'll get in there. We'll go to war if you disagree with me on aliens, but that's okay. That's okay. It's all love in here. Give us 5 stars on iTunes if you think we're worthy. We appreciate that. It helps the show grow. And thank you for listening. We appreciate it. Our job is to keep getting better and keep bringing you value. So love you guys. We'll talk to you next week.